All right, we're about to jump back in time to one of the most critical moments in financial history, the 1929 stock market crash. And I want you to forget everything you think a bad day on Wall Street looks like. Because this wasn't just a bad day. This was a financial earthquake that sent shockwaves around the entire planet and basically set the stage for the world we live in today.
Okay, so to really get it, I want you to imagine the Roaring Twenties as the biggest, most incredible party America had ever thrown. The economy was booming, people felt invincible, and it really seemed like the good times would never, ever end. But, every party has a morning after. And in 1929, the world woke up to the worst hangover in history.
So how did this party get so wild in the first place? Well, in the late 1920s, the U.S. stock market wasn't just doing well, it was on fire. People called it the Hoover bull market, and pretty much the whole country got swept up in this one very simple and very dangerous idea that stocks could only go up.
And this is the part that's just wild to me. It wasn't just for the Wall Street big shots, oh no. We're talking about everyone, from factory workers to farmers to cooks. People were putting their life savings into the market, mortgaging their homes, literally anything to get a piece of the action. It was a national obsession. So you're probably wondering, how could a regular person afford to get in on this? Well, here's the secret sauce: buying on margin. In a nutshell, it's just borrowing money to buy stocks. Think of it as the ultimate FOMO machine, fear of missing out. It let people invest way more money than they actually had. And hey, as long as the market was going up, you looked like a genius. But if it fell, well, that's where the danger was hiding.
And this really shows you just how high things got. By September of 1929, the Dow Jones hit a dizzying 381. At that very same moment, something like 300 million shares were being held on margin. The entire system was basically a giant house of cards, but nobody wanted to be the one to admit the party was over.
And then, in October, the music just stopped. All that confidence that had been fueling this massive boom, it just evaporated, almost overnight. And the very foundations of Wall Street began to crack.
And when things started to go bad, they went bad fast. It started with Black Thursday, a huge panic sell-off. For a hot second, it looked like some big bankers had stopped the bleeding, but that was just a Band-Aid. The real panic came back with a vengeance on Black Monday, with a nearly 13% drop, and then Black Tuesday. That was it. The day the bottom just completely fell out. The market just collapsed. That house of cards, it was flattened. In the days that followed, the sheer scale of the financial destruction was, well, it was almost unbelievable. Fortunes that had taken decades to build were simply wiped out. Not in years, not in months, but in a matter of hours.
This chart just really drives it home. And remember, these aren't some risky startups. These were the giants, the blue chips. General Electric, basically cut in half. U.S. Steel, hammered. But just look at RCA. It was one of the darlings of the tech world back then. It plunged from a high of 505 all the way down to 26. Just imagine that. So while this absolute catastrophe is unfolding, what were the nation's leaders saying? This. You had President Hoover and his Treasury Secretary telling the public that business was fundamentally sound. It's just a chilling look at how disconnected they were from the reality that was hitting everyday people. And just to be clear, this wasn't a quick dip that recovered. The damage was deep. After that peak of 381, the Dow wouldn't even get back over 200 for another 2 decades. This wasn't just a market event. It was the start of a long, dark chapter. So, okay, we've seen what happened, but the really important question is why? Why did this incredible bull market just completely implode? Well, as it turns out, it wasn't just one thing, but a whole toxic mix of problems brewing under the surface. So let's run through the main culprits. First, you've got that out-of-control speculation and all that money borrowed on margin. Then, the Federal Reserve decided to make it harder to get credit at the absolute worst possible time. Add to that a bunch of complex and shady corporate structures and huge bank loans that nobody could pay back. But here's the real kicker. Beneath all the stock market hype, the real economy was already quietly slipping into a recession. But the story doesn't end with the crash. Not even close. That was just the first massive domino to fall. And it set off a chain reaction that would pull the entire world into a decade of darkness. The stock market crash was the trigger for what we now call the Great Depression, a period of incredible poverty and struggle that lasted for about 10 years.
It went from being a financial crisis to a massive human crisis very, very quickly.
And this pain wasn't just an American problem. The world was already so interconnected that the shockwave from Wall Street spread like a virus, crippling economies all over the globe, from the biggest industrial nations to the smallest developing ones.
Which leaves us with a really powerful question. We've seen the whole story, the speculative fever, the borrowed money, the underlying weaknesses, and the devastating result. Knowing all of that, you have to ask yourself, how different are things today? Could a crash on that scale happen again? Now that is something worth thinking about.